Hi, Céline.
Salut, Alex.
Hi, Alex. You wanted to speak about family. How could you start? Alex is saying. You're not helping me a lot, are you? It's not possible. It's a little bit dry there, Alex. It's a little bit direct, no transition. Alex is saying we're speaking about different programs, and the program of family came to us and reported the influence could have family on the individual with obligations, even in consciousness, by looking at your family. In our conversations, we also talked about, like the attitude to do, to imitate, because I'm part of this family, because there is in this tradition, there's rituals in the family. Well, we said, sometimes it's not always easy to detach from it. And Céline adds, I would say that the pot, the family is like a pot, first, to format us with this idea of mimetism, with this idea also of models. It can be the opposite also, but by talking about this optic, beyond what I'm seeing is what you're talking about right now, is that when we're individuals in this process of individualization, there's still sometimes the famous family link. So, to say it all, it happened this morning in rapport with a discussion that we had with a friend that made me, during this discussion, it made me see the example of how I lived it by myself also, because there's no recipe, but it's just to testify on what I went through. And that sentence, that family link, it's so enormous in terms of vibration, but vibration that's very, how do I say this, not enveloping, but where we could dilute ourselves. It starts there, to dilute ourselves as an individual. That's where it starts. And in fact, as a child, as a very young child, around 10 or 12 years old, I was observing a lot already, and it was to see and to have this certainty that the family story, my mother, the story of my father and of my great-grandparents, or my grandparents, it was known within me that it wasn't mine. And so it's like I had, I was able to see that it isn't mine. And so it liberated me very young. I liberated myself very young by that knowledge. One, of a certain influence that was kind of underneath it all, and two, of this story of heredity, as an example, genetical heredity, genetics. But there we could also say, science proves by probability that you have this risk or this chance that your grandfather, grandmother, mother, or father had. And I knew that very young, that it was false, that it was just a program. And it's horrible to say it, because any scientist would laugh at me, but I don't care. It's so enormous to say this. It's like a seed that we put as a probability, a scientific one, that potentially you could have what your grandmother or father had, and etc. That's already on the principle of health, We could say it this way. For example, my father had an Alzheimer's, and it was discovered very late, but it had been there for a long while already, as a neurolog told us. When it's impossible, you can't see it. So it's true that it's an emotional shock, an intense shock in your life, but I went through it. And during a family meeting with a cousin and his wife was saying, "Oh, I'm scared. I can't take it anymore because on my mother and on my father, and look at yours also, they all had this." And before she said this, "Why are you scared?" That's what I said. "Well, look at my mother and my father, and look at your father." This form of disease. Why do you want to be scared? Why do you want to be scared? I said, "I'm not scared of this. It doesn't concern me." So I had this detachment that was very frank, that couldn't be moved on my individuality. His life isn't mine. And it's not that I auto-programmed myself and I'm doing a mantra, something that, you could say. But no, I had this certitude, this knowledge that all of this is inductions, programs, that by your will, and by this knowledge and this will that comes right away, it makes sure that it can't be taken. We'll have a meeting in a few years, but I really had this certitude. I had no fear, no attachment to all of this. And so it's part of this famous family link that's not only effective, like affectionate, but it's also a heredity. On this side of, fatality, that is a program that is very anchored in many people. But for me, it didn't anchor itself. It's not there at all. So concerning this family link, there's also this autonomy as a young adult. Yes, I asked for money when I needed it. How can I say it? There's this emotion of non-obligation. And I transmitted that to my children when they were 19, and they're going to be 22 soon. I needed to tell them. There's a time where I asked them to sit down, and I said, "I have something to tell you." I told them, "I don't owe you anything, and you don't owe me anything. You don't know anything to each other. Love, yeah, it's okay." So the idea also, I knew that they were listening very particularly at that moment, and I had that knowledge that I needed to transmit them that knowledge. And that I said to them, "I want you free." I already said that in a web radio, but it has a rapport in what we were speaking about today also. Because effectively, we've all been programmed to these, suppers on Christmas or on Sundays. But after a certain age, each and every one of us, how many of us want to say, "Oh, I don't want to go in the family, and I don't want to go there," and we go anyways? I don't know how you see them, Alex, but I thought it was important to speak about this because as a conscious being in this process, we're also submitted again to these certain obligations. And if we cut these off, it doesn't stop love. there's things that are, it's very vicious, because what does it bring behind all of this? You know, guilt, you're not a good child, or it's always like this. And that is really, you know, shit. How do you see it, Alex? I see the influences that were useful for me. And I see the influences that were, that, you know, slowed me down. So I see them both. In my family link, what served me in my own experience, you spoke a while ago about ambition, the ambition of my father, or I consider that when, you know, the people that start at the bottom of the mountain and they finish on top, and that was something that was transmitted to his sons, to say, you don't stop until you haven't gone to the summit, to the end. So that we can see it in a certain point of view, like an influence that would be favorable. But for me, I also put my own dose of observation. And I was like, I almost at the top of the mountain. And when I was in university, and then what does it serve to go to the end? I was completely done, and the different steps and the different diplomas. And one day, it's an anecdote that I don't talk about a lot, but I found myself to go find the results of the, you know, the many diplomas that I've had, and I find myself alone there on the parking. They say, what are you going to do with this? What are you doing there? All alone to go and find a diploma, to go and get there. How are you going to exploit this? So I found myself, before doing it, 1,000 reasons to do it. Yeah, go do it. And that nourished that family link. I did how my father told me, and in my experience, we can see in a simple first degree way, either I'm in position 2 or 3, or attraction or repulsion. That's how I see it now. But it brought me to position myself on what I wanted. Do I want to entertain this family link and do like he did? But when I was conscious of this process, and I wasn't conscious then, though, culturally, what was happening, but I already saw that there was something that was, you know, closed me off in the order of reproduction of a cycle. This notion of cycle that can be reproduced comes back to me. You're going to do like the elders have done, the elders. And in my own life, I played with what was in repetition with the cycle in link with family, and what was also creative. In the order of creative, new, that was never realized in the family, that I needed to verify in the beginning. And it was far from being encouraged. Yeah, of course, because you're coming out of the circle. You're coming out of the clan. On an examples that were very pragmatic. Creative examples also in the beginning, like writing, or how can I say, it was like a combat in the beginning, because the subject of my first books that came out was really a problem in the point of view, like ethical. The subjects that I was talking about, it wasn't possible to talk about. It wasn't conceivable. And that's where we see the limits. And that's where we see the breaks. And if we continue to tell ourselves, yeah, because I'm part of the family, because I'm part of the clan, well, I'm stopping myself from realizing creative things. So you stop yourself as an individual. So it brings, what does it bring today? Well, it brings recognition that effectively there's good that came out of what was lived in my adolescence and my childhood. There's things that inspired me, of my father, my mother, I can't say my brothers because there's not really a link. We spoke about it this morning, but my father, I look at him today, if there's no strong link between brothers, it's not normal, because for him, in his construction, it was a foundation, an element that was constructive, and he had a tendency that everything that came out of the clan, well, you had to be scared of that. It was always that, because the confidence can't be outside of that clan. So that's the same, it's the same break. I respect his way of seeing things, that's his. But there's a moment where it wasn't instantaneously, but on that example, why I dissociated myself of this. So I can be capable of, in my experience, confidence is really the center of my story, of my own program. And so the great program, we see where it comes from, where the source comes from, to have confidence outside of your family. So that can be very enclosing, and it's very false. Actually, it's not real. We're not in reality, like Céline is saying. It's impressions. It's impressions that was stuck to me. It's transmission of impressions. And effectively, Céline is saying that's what we need to observe, I think, on the family cell. You see the word? The family cell. Alex is adding, your example from generation to the other is like cells that were transmitted and that weren't good from one person to the other. And when you're conscious really of your own power and how you're capable of being alone or in your health or autonomous, effectively there's a great, plan in all of this. It's part of the process of programs that are inducted by others. Céline is saying, sort of father, mother, this process of modelization or pattern. And the doctors that are going to say, there's, probability of this or that, but a probability stays a probability. And if it's inducted in my program, the one of transmission, so in fact, that's why we speak also, why do we speak of transgenerational? Why do we speak of family stories? Programs are duplicated on the lineage very often. And Alex says it shows me, but when when you're the element, Céline is saying that, destroys this pattern, you completely destroy this lineage, this family lineage. You take your individuality, and that's what was interesting to speak about and to testify anyways about this. Not to teach, but to testify. I want to be clear on this. I just wanted to add, Alex is saying, because it shows again the cycle, the character, the absence of innovation, the absence of creativity. Because one generation to the other, it's programs that are repeated. As an example, program of sickness or nervous system sickness, because my father had Alzheimer's, because I'm going to be, I'll have Alzheimer's. Everything that happened beforehand in my family can happen to me. So there's no creativity between generation. So it would take away our power. So Céline is saying, it takes all our power, but it's all the opposite. So it's all these programs that are inducted, repeated for, for many, many years that need to be exposed. And Alex is saying, it's a repetition of an injunction. What is the injunction? You don't need a lot of it, but if you start to believe in this injunction, you're going to have this sickness. Well, there's more chance that you have this sickness. If you accept and concede to this program, you will have this program. And you're going to say, I knew. You're going to, one thing is going to say, I knew I was going to have this sickness. But when you come out of this program and you say, it's not part of my scenario, well, there's a great chance that it's not part of your scenario. I'm saying it's a way of speaking, programming, but we have the capacity of interrupting these repetitive programs. And Céline is saying, yeah, it's to put, a kick in the ass to these programs that are sticking on us. It's only impressions. It's programs that are printed, circuits that are printed on us. Well, you just cut off the circuit. Alex is saying, in words that were said to us, things that tell us that cannot be changed, and all these phenomenons that Céline is adding, but if you apply on a button on and off and you stop the circuit, well, the interrupter can cut it off. And that's why to observe all of this by knowing that it's programs, that it's inductions. And so if we accept these inductions, we just need to have an event and boom, it can start. We're all, if you see a group of people, imagine they're all, going around with inductions. Each and every one of us has inductions. How many of us, and these people that are around in this group, sometimes in their thoughts that aren't theirs, have a thought for the mother that isn't going well because she has something, and all of a sudden there's still a thought that comes right after, oh, it's going to be my turn, but I don't know when. It's abominable when you look at all of this. And that's no longer possible anymore. It's no longer possible to think this way. When I did this transmission to my children, it's really so that they can integrate it. They can integrate that there isn't any family link or attachment or lineage in a family or characters that cannot be moved. And the same thing for obligations, because we speak of patterns or sickness or heredities on health, but these patterns, these famous patterns that are reproduced, or meeting each other every Sunday. If it goes well, okay, but even if it goes well, you don't feel like it. You don't want to go. And why do we go? And why do we go? I don't feel like it. I go, because if I don't go, it's going to hurt. And there's always something. There's always, something that happens in the back. But really, everyone goes. And, everybody goes for a code so that there can be a family. And Alex explains it's not because we've lived this way that it's the same way for everyone, because there's some feel free to be together, and but I had a visual a while ago, Alex, and I was laughing because it's quite funny. I see a family meal. Everyone comes with their own entity, their own little, pesticide there. You have the humans that are there, but you have, the little bugs that are there. That, when is the combat going to start here at the family table? So this visual came and it made me laugh, but in the experiences. And in order to be submitted to this, it's always the program. It's always, conscious, in a consciousness. What came to me, Alex is saying when you were speaking, we can do everything. It comes from our creative capacity, and we can also detach and undo. So our creative capacity comes in a way of doing, but also to undo, to construct and to destruct. If we stay in our ideas, Céline is saying that we don't have this power of destruction. We are the prey for everything all the time. There's this power of destruction to integrate that I've integrated with success or less success at certain moments, because when we said this a while ago, we are all the time possessed temporarily or longer for others, but there's also always these temptations to enter, and it's for us to see it. It's for us to stop this and to chase away and to destroy when it's happening. Because these intrusions, it's not for our well-being. So when do you want to construct on someone, when you're going to have your creative power on an entity that wants to pump your energy? Well, you destroy him. There's no pity on this, no state of being. And it becomes an indicator, Alex is saying, is that when you're well, but if it generates something on you emotionally that makes you unwell, if we say it well, you can be, there's an intrusion on this. It becomes an indicator that permits you to see what's being played underneath it, or to see what's coming to me when we exchange on this, what's waiting for the good opportunity to come. So that is, illuminating for ourselves. When it generates a state, we could say that's favorable, or a state of being that is not favorable. So what comes to me in this state of mind is, what concerns me is that I wouldn't detach myself of what generates states that are favorable to me. Do you know what I mean? Is that I'm not searching or only looking for neutrality of the benefits in a human being. I accept to see that there are states of being, if they make me feel good, well, I accept it. Evidently, Céline is saying, you don't have to be in a favorable, ecstatic or pathetic or polarized, positive, plus. No. All of that also is to be looked at. It's a process of balance. It's nothing. You don't have to, take away states of being that are favorable. It's not intelligent to do that. Is there something else that comes to you, Céline, on the subject of family? Well, still again, it was in a rapport that when it concerns beings that are in process of being conscious by the process of observation, well, I found that it was interesting to speak of this and to bring it back, because even by being in this process of observation that brings destruction or others, things, each and every one has their own mechanism of doing things, there's also really traces of this. And that's what I'm observing. There's traces. So for me, I don't have my parents anymore. I only have a sister that's very far. But I don't feel obligated to go and spend Christmas with her, for example. My parents, when they were still together or alive, I didn't have this obligation, but they had this obligation. They felt obligated to call every weekend. As an example, it stays things, that are sympathetic, but it's a process of an obligation. As a family, it's something to observe in a point of view of that's more precise. And what comes to me, Alex is saying, when you're speaking of this, when we say this, is that the family link, the way we hear it, like, the links of blood or exceptions of adoption, we see that the blood has a character of reproduction also, of situations that are known, that are going to be known by others also, the ones that follow. So instead of that family, what I see, you were speaking of your friend a while ago, it's also mine, that I see like this. I said to her, you're part of us, to be part of us, even if there's no link, blood link. Instead of that family, it's a notion of vibrational sympathy that doesn't imply any conditionment, no collective ritual, no way of doing that is communal like before, that it's the being, there is this affinity with this being. And when we spoke about this before, also the solid character, we know that it's solid, and that's an indicator, and we know where it comes from. We spoke about this, is that the fact that there is the consciousness and the capacity of discerning what comes from the human being and what doesn't come from the human being, and will not take everything. I have a hard time to conceive, to put all of that in the same basket. It really, it generates this suffering. We talked about this also. It's not because there's suffering. It's not suffering that's legitimate in this. It's not suffering to live right to the end. Céline is saying that there is liberation. That is bullshit. That's really bullshit. It's a little bit, it's milk and caviar for the dogs and forces that are behind all of this belief. So there, I went around the circle in this, but this notion of power and creative, but also our power of destroying, evidently, but certainly that they come and attack us. They come to take our creative energy and take our power. It's for us to recuperate this and to burn completely, and to do it with discernment, like Alex is saying, because this capacity of destruction, what comes to me is that if we exert this capacity of destruction that is very powerful, we said it yesterday also, the rigor of human being that is developing in consciousness, is to address a power that is extremely sensitive, not hypersensitivity. Vigilance becomes an attention that is extremely... I know that there's a word that I love to use sometimes, is that is above respect, is deference. When I know that I am, when I know the person that's in front of me, is there a sensitivity that is, that there's no filter, no mask, and there's a lot of sensitivity, and there's attention to bring to this. That's what comes to me to conclude here. Thank you, Céline. Thank you, Alex.